The US says the dollar is supreme. China just broke the system. On March the 4th, 2026, tensions around the Strait of Hormuz escalated sharply. What happened next wasn't on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It didn't trend on X. But in the rooms where financial power actually lives, the reaction was silence. Because somewhere in the Persian Gulf, a Chinese supertanker loaded with Iranian crude didn't pay in dollars, didn't use SWIFT, didn't ask Washington's permission. And in that moment, something shifted. Not overnight, not all at once, but one small step was taken toward dismantling the system behind the American dollar, one barrel at a time. Let me give you the specifics because specifics are what make this real. Since February 28, 2026, the day US and Israeli forces struck Iran, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, made one thing clear. The lever of blocking the Strait of Hormuz, he said, must definitely be used. And he used it. Within days, daily ship transits through the strait collapsed from around 110 vessels to fewer than 10. 16 tankers were attacked in the surrounding waters. War risk insurance became effectively unpayable for most commercial operators, and the Brent crude surged past $110 a barrel. 20% of global seaborne oil and a significant share of LNG normally transits the strait every single day. There's no alternative route, no bypass. Every barrel from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, and Qatar must pass through that 34-mile gap. But here's what the news missed. Iran didn't simply close the strait. Iran offered to reopen it under one condition. A senior Iranian official told CNN that Tehran was prepared to allow a limited number of oil tankers to transit, but only if the cargo was traded, settled, and paid for in Chinese yuan. Not dollars, not euros, yuan. And the plumbing to make that happen? It was already built and waiting. By March 15th, according to available shipping data, 11.7 million barrels of Iranian crude had already moved from Iranian ports to Chinese refineries. Not through the international system that runs on dollar payments and Lloyd's of London insurance, through a shadow fleet of tankers, processed through China's own payment network called SIPS, settled entirely outside the US dollar, every single barrel. To understand why this matters, you need to understand the machine that is being taken apart piece by piece. In 1974, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. It wasn't a treaty that got headlines, but it may be the most consequential financial agreement in modern history. The arrangement was simple. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection and buy Saudi debt. Other Gulf producers followed, and suddenly every country in the world that needed oil, which is every country in the world, needed dollars to buy it. That created permanent structural global demand for American currency, which meant the US could print money, run massive deficits, and fund a military presence in 700 locations around the world because the world had no choice but to absorb those dollars. That system is called the petrodollar, and it has been the hidden engine of American power for 52 years. But here's the part you haven't heard on cable news. China's real weapon is not the yuan. It's something the Pentagon has no answer for. And it was built in plain sight over the last 8 years. Let me walk you through exactly how China dismantled each pillar of that system. Pillar 1, the payment rail. Every major oil transaction used to run through SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, a Brussels based network that processes payments in virtually every currency on earth. The US can and does weaponize SWIFT. Cut a country off from SWIFT and you effectively cut it off from the global economy. That is what happened to Iran, to Russia, to Venezuela. So China built its own network, CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system. In 2025 alone, CIPS processed the equivalent of $245 trillion in yuan-denominated transactions, a 43% increase from the year before. On a single day in March 2026, it processed 1.22 trillion yuan, roughly $178 billion, across nearly 42,000 transactions. That is not a test system, that is infrastructure. 5,000 plus banking institutions across 190 countries now connect to CIPS. When it launched a decade ago, there were fewer than 200. The network is no longer a workaround. It's becoming the default for nations that want to trade without Washington's permission. Pillar 2, the insurance layer. You may not have thought about this, but when a supertanker carries oil across the ocean, it needs insurance. For generations, that insurance ran through Lloyd's of London and a handful of Western underwriters. If you are under sanctions, you cannot get Western insurance, which means you cannot ship, which means the sanctions work. Iran's shadow fleet bypasses Western insurers entirely, and the volumes are not trivial. As of early 2026, approximately 166 million barrels of Iranian oil sat in floating storage near Chinese ports. Crude settled entirely in yuan, insured entirely outside the Western system. Pillar 3, the pricing mechanism. In 2018, China launched the Petroyuan contract on the Shanghai International Energy Exchange. For the first time in history, oil futures could be bought and sold in Chinese currency on a Chinese exchange. It was never meant to replace the dollar overnight. It was meant to build the accounts, the relationships, the muscle memory, so that when the moment came, the infrastructure was ready. The moment came on February 28, 2026. Pillar 4, the reserve currency anchor. The International Monetary Fund's own data shows the dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has fallen from 72% in 2001 to 57.8% in late 2024. Central banks have been quietly moving, not into euros, not into yen, but into gold. In 2024 alone, central banks purchased 1,000 tons, the third consecutive year above 1,000 tons, more than double the pace of the previous decade. When central banks buy gold, it means they are losing confidence in someone's currency. That someone is the United States. The United States still has one card left to play, but it may already be too late to play it. Trump has threatened 100% tariffs on any BRICS nation that tries to replace the dollar. He has threatened to destroy Iran's Kark Island oil infrastructure. These are not nothing, but here's the problem. Coercion is not the same as confidence, and the world has started to notice the difference. Let me bring this home, because none of this is abstract if you live in a country that uses the dollar. The petrodollar does one specific, powerful thing for American consumers. It allows the US to import enormous quantities of goods and energy while paying with dollars that the world is forced to hold. That suppresses inflation. It keeps your mortgage rate lower than it would otherwise be. It keeps the price of oil at the pump lower than it would be if the dollar were just a normal currency. When that system weakens, what happens? The dollar buys less. Oil priced outside the dollar system means importers must convert. More conversion means more selling of dollars. More dollar selling means a weaker dollar. A weaker dollar means higher prices at the pump, at the grocery store, on every imported product that fills every shelf in every store. We are not at the end of the petrodollar, not yet. The dollar still accounts for roughly 80% of global oil transactions. SWIFT still dwarfs SIPs. These things do not collapse in a day. But the direction is clear. BNP Paribas has estimated that if $600 billion to $1 trillion of oil trade shifts to yuan settlement, the yuan surpasses the Japanese yen to become the fourth most widely used global currency. Gold has already passed $5,400 per ounce, a price that reflects exactly one thing: declining confidence in paper money backed by governments that may not be as powerful as they once were. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping lane, it's now a test of whether the dollar system still runs the world, or whether a new system, built quietly over 8 years in Shanghai and Beijing, is ready to take its place. Tehran set the terms, Beijing supplied the plumbing. For 52 years, the world ran on America's financial system. Now China is offering an alternative. The only price is using the yuan. The question is not whether this is happening. The question is how fast. The US says the dollar is supreme, but power doesn't disappear overnight, it erodes. And this is what that erosion looks like.